And good evening, Libertarians. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the Executive Director of the Libertarian Party, and I am currently standing in for Pat Ford, who's having some technical issues. He's working on getting his thing going. Pat, are you there now?
I am here now.
Outstanding. So that is such a relief for our audience because it means they don't have to see me anymore. So I am popping out of the room. Audience, I turn you over to the capable hands of the chair of Rhode Island, Region 8 alternate, the man with the golden voice.
Folks, welcome to an hour with the candidates. The purpose of this show is two or threefold, depending on the evening it appear. First off, it's critically important that we as a party begin to understand that there are candidates around the nation running in quote unquote down ballot races. By the way, I hate that term down ballot race because it implies that it's just some obscure local election. I can tell you from the perspective of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement that there are no more important races in America today than what is going on at the local level. The way to, if you will, address the fundamental issues in America, some of which have contributed and exacerbated the situation with Corona COVID-19, is to change the mindset by planting a seed by responsible, quote unquote, governance at the hyper-local level. It could be the school board. It could be the town council. It could be the mayor. It could be the water board. Literally anything. Zoning board, God forbid. But yes, that's how we bring to people outside of our movement exactly how libertarianism can work for them. Which leads us to the second important portion, if you will, of this. Folks who are in what I call regular folks, lunch pail issues, addressing the challenges of the world, whether it be pre, post, during COVID, are looking at life through an ordinary prism, not the philosophical. And as important as the philosophy is to all of us in the Libertarian Party, it's critical that we develop the skills and the outreach and the approach to redefine everyday American issues, as I call them lunch pail issues, through the prism, through the lens, if you will, of a libertarian's perspective. So what we're talking about is when you discuss issues like minimum wage, when you discuss issues like pensions, when corporate subsidies, private-public partnerships, any one of them that are part of the fabric of ordinary everyday American life, we need to be able to address individuals' concerns from their perspective. And so in doing so, we invite a couple of candidates on a week from around the country. We share information about their districts, their states, their suburbs, their school boards, or just whatever. And we get a sense of the challenges they're facing. We talk about the issues. And then we come together at the end of the show, maybe to share a few tips and if there's any suggestions folks have, and essentially come together and when we leave the show, have a unique understanding of what's happening also in affiliates around the country. Because on one hand, we share so many issues. On the other hand, there's a sense of connection that has started to take place as a result of this style of outreach. Because it's critically important that libertarians understand that you could be from Massachusetts or New Hampshire or like myself, Rhode Island, and the individual running for a mayoralty in Oregon is as fundamentally important to the movement as what's happening down the street from you. So in doing so, first of all, as always, I want to give a shout out to Dan Fishman, the executive director who's been championing this project and also helping us get the fiscal aspect set up. And of course, to Nick Sarwalk, our national chairman, who got the facilities together in order to do this. So welcome to an hour with the candidates. Now, again, we were fumbling a little bit with some technological challenges. Who do I have up first this week, Dan? Who's first on the on our, if you will, political game show? Richard Manzo. Richard, I've had the opportunity to meet you in real life, both at the New Hampshire convention. Welcome to an hour with the candidates.
Well, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, Pat, and it's great to see you as always.
Absolutely. So tell us about your background and tell us about the office you're running for. Let's have a conversation about New Hampshire.
Sure. Well, to start with, I am currently elected to 3 public offices in my town, 2 of which are particularly relevant to the race I'm running. I'm the secretary of the Trust Fund Trustees, which is the local government board that manages Goffstown's investment portfolio, scholarships, and restricted accounts, trusts. And I'm on the budget committee in Goffstown, which obviously it sets the budget for the town. Final approval goes to the voters, but we do essentially generate the budget that appears on the ballot. So I'm running for county treasurer, and the 2 roles of the county treasurer are to have a hand in creating the budget and a hand in managing the investment portfolio of the county. So the 2 offices I hold are very particularly relevant to the office I'm seeking, which makes me a particularly credible candidate for the role.
Absolutely. Now, explain the system of governance in New Hampshire, because it's a little bit different, as are most states. They all have their own little twerks. Some have representative town meetings, some have budget meetings. Others place a great deal of importance on the county. Other states like Rhode Island, counties virtually don't exist. So right. Give us a sense of how New Hampshire is structured. You also have a fascinating state legislature, which I believe looks at some days seems to look just like the Senate in Star Wars. But explain that to us as well.
Well, the legislature here is particularly large, especially for such a small state. I'm not exactly sure of the number of state reps we have, but it is we have a lot more than a lot of larger states even. So we do have much more of a direct representation of the people. And then the municipal government system, you can even find this on Wikipedia. It's called a New England town, where the government is essentially run by the voters at yearly meetings. And then, like state parties, for example, we have executive committees, usually called a select board, a town council, board of selectmen, something like that, board of aldermen, that make the decisions between town meetings. And the counties aren't very majorly important to the town. They do have a role in funding education. They do have a role in eviction processes. The sheriffs have some law enforcement power. But the particular interest that I have in running for county treasurer is to reduce the tax burden by finding alternative revenue streams, which is usually coded in New Hampshire as an income tax, which no one in New Hampshire really wants, but Democrats use alternative revenue streams to either mean an income tax or a broad-based sales tax. But I want to move to a more aggressive investment strategy so that we can move away from taxes as the source of income for the town. And we are able to do that without reducing spending, though, of course, I do want to reduce spending as well.
Now, you alluded to it in the run-up to this conversation. You've occupied roles within the community. How important was it for you, both in terms of getting your own institutional knowledge, but at the same time, giving folks a real familiarity with how Richard Manzo operates in terms of getting on these town boards? How critical was that?
It's interesting you asked that because the campaign that I was actually running first in town, I did not win, but I made a name for myself. I was able to convince the town establishment, if you will, that I was a trustworthy, credible individual who had a good mind for the issues, and I ended up being added to the Goffstown Budget Committee to fill a vacancy, confirmed unanimously by the committee. When the vacancy happened, I was the first person they called, the only person that they talked to, and they confirmed me right away. So it's been very important to get my name out there. It's been very important to talk to voters about my stances on the issues, and then demonstrate follow through, of course, which is absolutely major. I'm out there saying that I want to reduce taxes, but that I'm not going to yank out the roads from underneath them, yank out the public schools from underneath their children, yank away the fire departments, the police departments, or anything like that. So showing that I can create manageable growth and reduce the budget where it's necessary has been absolutely key in building up my credibility in town.
Absolutely. Now, there's a saying, something effective, be the office that you want to be. So you lost the election, but you stayed in touch. You stayed in touch? You continued to attend meetings? How did you stay connected to folks?
Yeah, I just built up a name for myself, that I had a command of the issues. That's something that one of the school district employees, the business administrator, said to me once, that he was surprised by the command of issues I have at my age. I'm only 21, but I took part in a debate for the open select board seat between me, one incumbent, or actually it was two incumbents at the time, 4 candidates. So 2 newcomers, 2 incumbents, running to fill the 2 vacant, the 2 ended terms on the select board. So I demonstrated intelligence, I demonstrated credibility, and I demonstrated commitment to undertaking the work in a way that wasn't going to be a radical change, and more of a reformist than a abolitionist, I guess you could say, in the form of governance that I take. So just building that up, creating a relationship with the establishment in town was a major boost to my credibility, and I ended up being added to fill that vacancy. So that was really my breakthrough moment.
It's so important to understand this, because when it comes to the business of town government, as much as we'd love it to be a radical moment where you can strike your flag, if you will, in the soil and declare true anarchy,
right. So
much of everyday life in town government comes down to what some would see as the drudgery. What you clearly see as an enjoyable extension of yourself, the day-to-day numbers, the operations, how departments work, how literally this jigsaw puzzle, this mess of government is put together. And if you can't understand that, and if you don't know your individual town, your individual district, whatever, if you don't know that cold, literally, it's almost as if you work there. It's virtually impossible to suggest change and be taken seriously, isn't it?
Right. And yeah, that's been one of the most enjoyable aspects of it, is learning how to build consensus around an idea that many people don't view as either necessary or even preferable to the system that we have now. Suggesting a cut to a road plan, even if the road plan is consistently underspent, people are like, wait, well, I don't like the roads how they are now. How are we going to cut the budget? You make the argument that, well, bringing the budget more in line with what's actually spent is actually beneficial, because voters will be able to trust that what we're putting forward is actually what the town needs in each budget line, that we're not just taking taxes from them to build up an account, that we're not just taking taxes from them only to return it a year later so we can say, hey, well, our taxes aren't so high this year, right? And when in reality, you were just pre-taxed the year prior. The ethical concerns that are come around particular budget lines, who has control of each budget line, special accounts, capital reserve funds, everything like that. Building consensus around an idea that is kind of a radical divergence from the status quo, which is that the people should in fact have more direct control over the budget, not just people who are elected by a 10% turnout in a town election. It's a hard sell, but it's an important sell to learn how to make.
Excellent. In order to be a disruptive force, in a sense, one needs to clearly understand the business model in which you are to quietly, in a stealthy manner, over an extended period of time, well, disrupt.
Right.
It sounds so simple, but one of the challenges in an emerging third party is having that type of credibility where you clearly understand again how that puzzle glues together and how it works, and in many cases how it might not work that well. What tell us about your district in the part of New Hampshire that you're in? Is it, its economic makeup, its cultural makeup? Give us a flavor for your community.
So Hillsborough County is the largest county in the state. We have the largest city in the state, Manchester, New Hampshire. We also have Nashua, New Hampshire. And really, the economic makeup varies wildly, not only within our large cities, but from town to town. We have more affluent towns, Bedford, New Hampshire, for example. We have more average towns. Goffstown, which is where I live, is one of the larger towns in the state. We have towns and cities. Cities are typically larger, but Goffstown kind of bucks that trend at 17,000 people. Bedford has 20,000 people. Across the entire county, though, you're looking at our most densely populated areas. Property taxes here are extremely high. Our vacancy rates in housing is extremely low. And typically when it comes to education spending, it's about double what we spend on the municipal side of the government. So those are the types of things that I hope to tackle as county treasurer.
And specifically from a libertarian perspective, how can you, in any one of your three little worlds within the Richard Manzo Libertarian universe, how can what principles have you seen that you can apply in real life to simply, when it really comes down to it, improving the life of the folks in your community?
Well, first of all, transparency. As I was talking about, the budget usually has more money than we know we're going to need. And I'm not talking about money in case of an emergency. I'm talking about putting $300,000, $400,000 extra into a road plan that we know we're not going to spend. We've never spent in the past. We just don't have the man hours to spend the money. Talking to voters, that's not something that they approve of, obviously, because that's extra money on their tax bill every single year, and they don't actually get what they're being promised. So transparency is issue number one. Issue number two that I've found very agreeable, no matter your political views, has been that point that I made about reducing the tax burden without reducing spending, just by taking a more aggressive investment strategy. And I'm not talking about, moving instruments every day, trying to game the market or anything like that. I'm just talking about moving to a more diverse portfolio. Stocks that pay dividends. Selling occasionally. The current county treasurer doesn't take a very aggressive stance. He holds for an extremely long time. So just viewing it through the lens of a libertarian, the reduced tax burden is good, puts more money in the pockets of each individual, but reducing the tax burden across the board, people are going to go out and eat more. That's more revenue for the state through the tax system. People might put money into the state lottery, for example, which helps fund education. And last but not least, the issue of just accurately portraying what the government is doing. What is the treasurer if not an auditor? As Dan Fishman has said before, the referee should not wear the jersey of either team. So having an auditor who's not a member of either party really makes sure that what the Democrats and Republicans have been doing in the past is what they've said that they've been doing. So those are the three most important issues that I've found to voters.
Mm-hmm. New Hampshire is a very diverse economy, doesn't it? I mean, you've got, as an outsider, I see it as three different regions. You've got the Seacoast, you've got Nashua, which sadly, as many New Hampshire folks have found out, has become an extension of Massachusetts to a degree. Yes. And then, of course, you've got central New Hampshire going on up, even maybe into a fourth district, northern New Hampshire. Have they found an economic balance in the state, or do you find very diverse outcomes based on where you are in New Hampshire?
It is based on where you are, and I think that the major part of it isn't really where you can find employment. We are a small state, so commuting isn't extremely difficult. But if you can find work near where you live, obviously you're spending less on gas. And then the other thing of note is that the most preferable towns to live in have literally no vacancies. No housing is ever built. It's not approved. Town establishment members of the government just view new housing negatively. People move in, then they'll bring their kids, which will be a burden on the school system. But of course, that's a very one-track mind in terms of the housing crisis that we have in New Hampshire. We need people to move here so that they're putting money into the tax system. People just view it as a drain, but that's not the case. Obviously, if people work in Massachusetts, for example, they're going to be spending their money here, spending their money on food here, and really the only sales tax that we have is on rooms and prepared food, and that's our major point of income other than the property taxes. So if people are living here in New Hampshire and working in Massachusetts, they're not draining our tax system because they're paying our property taxes, they're paying our meals taxes, but they're not using our resources as much. They're on the Massachusetts unemployment system, for example. They're driving on Massachusetts roads more. They're spending more time just generally in Massachusetts. So really it depends. If you live way up north in New Hampshire, yeah, your job is probably going to be different than if you live in Nashua. But it really depends on the vacancy rate where you are. It really depends on how long your commute is.
It's you spoke to two different issues, and the first that I'd like to tackle in terms of challenges as they represent individual states, of course, is education.
Yes.
Does New Hampshire have one of these convoluted educational formulas where everyone is sharing out of one big pot, or is largely reliant on local property taxes for local schools?
It's largely reliant on property taxes for local schools. The county does pull some of the education funding, so it can allocate it somewhat more to the needs of each school. But each town collects the property taxes. It's just a share of it goes to the county, and then the county education is then reallocated to each district as a revenue source. So it's not super convoluted. It's not one big pot, but there is definitely a portion of it that is from one large pot, I guess you could say. And what goes into that one large pot? County education funding, state education funding, which comes from multiple sources, including property taxes, the lottery, and I believe the Liquor Commission. I'm not 100% sure about that, but so looking at it that way, there's two revenue streams. There's the property taxes, and then there's the statewide systems.
The other exiting crisis facing states everywhere, and this was before the market collapse, was of course public employee pensions and something called OPED, which is a kind of a bizarre term generating, if you will, calculating towns, municipal governments, county governments' exposure on healthcare costs. So it sounds like the county in New Hampshire, the office that you're running for, you will effectively have your hands, if you will, involved in literally just about every lunch pail issue imaginable. Is county government? Are you guys facing pension crisis in New Hampshire? And what's your thoughts about that as a libertarian?
Not in my county. I do know that in other counties that we're facing solvency issues based on a number of different issues. But I think that obviously that the major point here is that in many cases governments are paying for their retirement programs of their employees. Employees aren't contributing as much as the governments are, and that just leads to the government using pensions as slush funds. There's very little private control over these pensions, and it really just comes down to again, the government being a terrible way to do things.
Absolutely. In about 30 seconds or so, because we've been talking about so many issues, we haven't gotten to it. And at the end of the show, maybe we'll coalesce around this. But in the era of COVID, campaigning, how much of that is a challenge to you right now? You've jumped into this race early. I've seen, being in New England myself, I've seen some of the work you've done. Any tips on how you're going to be campaigning when social contact is an issue?
It's pretty difficult. Not so much for myself. I'm very blessed to have people who have volunteered for the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, who collected my 150 petitions that I need. But again, 150 is very low for a countywide candidate. Usually state rep districts need 150 just for them. And we can't collect petitions right now. You cannot disinfect a piece of paper. So if someone happens to touch it, it's like either you have to throw it out or you have to put people at risk. And the Libertarian Party consistently able to collect these petitions, and that means that we are, if we try to collect the petitions, going to put those 3,000 people at risk. If a party is never able to do it, then they're not going to put those 3,000 people at risk. So we've ceased petitioning, and we're going to address our options from there. I'm also on the state executive committee, so I am involved in that. I don't want to tip our hand just yet, but we do have plans that we're working on.
Excellent. Well thought out approach, well articulated focus on local issues as a libertarian. Congratulations, Richard. I think everyone's got high hopes for you in New Hampshire, not even in just this race, but going forward.
Thank you.
You're building on a groundswell. You've got a serious foundation there. You've got folks volunteering for you. You've been actively fundraising. I know. So give us a few minutes. We're going to talk to Sasha, but I want to bring you back in because I think it's important we round out the conversation tonight with the whole issue of how do you do digital in the era of COVID.
Sure.
Richard Manzo, he's running for treasurer countywide in the state of New Hampshire. Joining me next is Sasha Cohen. He is a candidate for the House of Representatives in the 70th District in the great state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln. Sasha, welcome to An Hour with the Candidates.
Hey, Pat, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's you two have been very aggressive in campaigning early on, and I'm seeing that as a constant presence in the success of so many of the folks we've talked to in the few weeks that this show has been on the air. And the lesson going forward is we really don't know what awaits us in this world. And so for the candidates who jumped out there early, built a steady web presence, and were out there pressing the flesh, congratulations, because wow, the world changed in a short period of time. Tell us about your district. I mean, Illinois, of course, now is one of the poster children, sadly, for state fiscal failure. I'm sure Mr. McDonald was, when he was talking about state bankruptcies, was probably muttering under his breath, Illinois, Rhode Island, Illinois, Rhode Island. Tell us about your background, your political background, and why you're running and some of your experiences so far.
Sure. So I've been a longtime activist, primarily on single issue work, with a focus on drug policy. And then over the last couple of years, as things have seemed to just decline in our political sphere, I've felt an obligation to get more involved. Most recently, this past November, I was hired by Andrew Yang's campaign for president, and I spent 3.5 months in eastern Iowa, in the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City area, talking to voters, recruiting volunteers, and building a campaign base for the Yang campaign. After getting laid off, I returned to my roots within the Libertarian Party and decided that it was time for a change. And that, I live in a district that has about 20,000 college students. And if I can just tap into that anti-establishment kind of feeling amongst the campus and amongst the young people, that could be more than enough to propel me, not just to hitting that 5% for ballot access in county, but to actually win my race.
So what are the issues? So, well, more importantly, give us a makeup, if you will, of the county that you're doing. One of the things I think folks find fascinating, again, is you've in each county, in each jurisdiction, in each representative district, each one represents this unique microcosm, if you will, of life in general. Is academia the most important product, if you will, in the 70th district, or what else is going on?
Well, the 70th includes parts of about 4 or 5 counties. You've got DeKalb County, which is where my hometown of DeKalb is. Then you've got parts of Boone, Winnebago, Kane, and I believe one more. I would say that the largest employer probably is Northern Illinois University. We have almost 20,000 students, and the district's in total is 102,000 people. So about 20% of the district is just the students, and when you add in the professors, the maintenance staff, and everybody else who works as part of the university, it definitely is one of, if not the largest employer in the district.
Wow. My sense, and I've spent a fair amount of time Willy Lomanesque traveling the hills and dales of Illinois, is that to a certain degree, you've got Chicagoland, communities like Schaumburg, and Cook County in general, and so much of the focus economically and sometimes litigiously and sometimes legally is based on that one kernel of the state. Yet from Rock Island down to the southern part of the state, it's such a complex state. Is state government too Chicagoland focused in your opinion?
Absolutely. I've heard a lot about the Illinois separatist movement, which is a growing movement amongst people from the downstate region to effectively separate the state. Illinois has Chicago, Cook County, and the 5 collar counties. They're like right here on the lake. And then you've got a kind of outer ring of suburban areas that are sort of Chicago-esque. And then you get way out until you hit my district, which is the 70th. We're just south of Rockford, going down to about DeKalb and east a little bit from there. The state legislature is overwhelmed by people who represent the city of Chicago and the collar counties. Each state house district represents an average of 107,000 people. There's over 3 million people in Chicago alone. So that's 30 some odd house seats once you add in the collar counties, out of a total of 118. So they have an incredibly outsized influence over our state legislative process.
And because of, I'll use the term malfeasance for tonight. We're going to keep it clean. And incompetence being another one. There's this incredible drain on finances. Is there voter bitterness towards this, and particularly in the age of COVID?
Absolutely. Chicago has had the old school Democratic machine politics running for a very long time. And we've started to see some reduction in that in the last year or so with the inauguration of Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who definitely was not part of the machine.
True.
But their representatives in the state house and state senate still are very much part of that old school machine, which is managed by Mike Madigan, the Speaker of the Illinois House, who's managed to stay Speaker for, I want to say, about 3 decades with a single year of interruption. The man wields an unholy amount of power over the state's budgeting process, its legislative process, and even challengers from within his own party. It's often said that if you don't support Madigan's bid for speakership when you come in, that even if you're part of his own party, he won't let your bills come up for debate and vote. He really just has a stranglehold on the political process, and Democrats are unwilling to speak out against him. Republicans do nothing but blame him for everything. And I'd like to come in and sort of be a neutral force that doesn't have an allegiance to either of the major parties and is just focused on representing the people of my district and the people of my state.
And what are the issues concerning your district? What do they consider important?
So I think one of the primary issues that affects everybody in the state, but also in my district, is our property taxes and our state budget. We have one of the highest unfunded pension liabilities in the country, and our credit rating has been getting downgraded over and over again to the point where Illinois bonds are basically junk bonds. Our state is running closer and closer to the verge of absolute collapse. And we've had over 1 million people leave the state in the last 10 years. I want to start the process of fixing our budget crisis, actually passing a budget for one thing. I want to deal with our pension liabilities and also stop creating new ones. I want to set up a system where we can have a privatized retirement plan that state employees can pay into, that the state will contribute to at the time, but not one that we're going to be funding for decades and decades after that employee has left their service with the state.
True. It's interesting because Rhode Island is very much a political microcosm where I live of Illinois. And one of the few successes they've had is introducing some type of hybrid retirement system in there. So you've got two channels. Recently heard, much to the shock of many old-time politicos, were public employees saying, I wish I'd had a 401k because of that element of control. I mean, how important is it to get state and city governments out of the retirement business?
Oh, that's going to be one of my top priorities from day one. I think that if you can reduce or eliminate the pension crisis that we have in the state, we can actually start to move on to just a myriad of other issues. But until we get that budget impasse resolved, there's just very little that can be done.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because you've got future generations literally going to be paying the bills. On a personal note, my father's 97. He may actually, at the rate he's going, he may hit that rate where he's retired longer in his life than he's employed. But that happens all the time in public employee unions, and given the skyrocketing cost of healthcare, it's a recipe for absolute disaster. So from a libertarian perspective, how can you go to a state, the term moribund comes to mind, morass is another word. How do you go to a state and convince folks that you have to break this chain at some point? What's your philosophy there?
Well, I think you hold up examples of success. You talked about how Rhode Island has introduced this hybridized program, public and private retirement. And I think really demonstrating how that's worked for them and how that can work for our state, along with highlighting the seriousness of the issue and actually laying out the cold hard numbers of just how much debt we hold, just how bad our credit rating has gotten, and just how drastic of steps we're going to have to take to get things back in line.
The candidate who was our treasurer, who engaged in at least some level of pension reform, was held up as an exalted example, of course, as like most Rhode Island machine politicians, has sort of descended into the swamp with everyone else. But at the time, she used the term, it's all about the math. It's just the math. But largely, you have to depersonalize it. And somehow, particularly when you look at the culture of municipal corruption in that the collar counties and in Cook County and Chicagoland and downtown Chicago, when you look at that, you have to introduce marketing that will make folks forget, at least for a moment, that the pension that they're talking about happens to be being handed out to probably half of their family. And it's that bad in Chicago. It's really, combined with COVID, going to rip the state apart. Yeah. Equally is challenging, of course, is the culture in Illinois of gun control.
Yes.
We all know now that the strictest gun control laws actually in the universe are in Illinois and in parts of Illinois, and yet at the same time, there's this incredible amount of violent crime in portions of Chicago. What are your thoughts, and how do you address that?
Well, I mean, we only got concealed carry by federal court order. Illinois has, for a very, very long time, been one of the most stridently anti-gun states in the union. And I think that's another one where you have to start to depersonalize and talk, it's all about the math of what, do regulations actually help? What states have looser regulations? What are their violent crime rates like? And really laying out the case in a fact-based manner, because it's an argument that's very easy to get bogged down in the emotion and the tugging at the heartstrings of, but look at this person who was killed by gun violence, and look at this person. And if, absolutely, those are, every single life lost to violence of any kind is a tragedy. But we need to talk about solutions that actually will work for the majority of people in this state without infringing on their constitutional rights. Now, we've been seeing some action from the courts that gives me hope that it may be pulled away from a legislative side. There's an ongoing lawsuit regarding the FOID card, the Firearm Owner's ID, which is a really, I believe, Illinois unique program where you actually have to apply for an ID card just to be able to go and purchase a gun, which is just a completely ridiculous process. To my understanding, to get the FOID card, all you need is to apply for it, pay the $10 fee, and they run an NCIC check. Of course, when you go to purchase the gun, what are they going to run the exact same check? It's a ridiculous duplication that does nothing but add more time, add more regulatory framework, and slow down people who are just trying to exercise their rights. I have a very good friend, Alex, who waited 6 months to get his card back, despite a statutory requirement that they be returned within 30 days of application.
Wow. And so gang violence in the city continues to explode.
Absolutely.
Is that, and again, in a complicated, large state like Illinois, one would say, well, how does that impact, a county it's literally, are you guys even in a different time zone maybe? But it's so diverse in such an alternate universe, but the budgetary pull, literally grabbing folks, individual communities by the ankles and just pulling them into that swamp has got to be tremendous, given the crushing poverty that exists in parts of Chicago.
Absolutely.
What's your libertarian message to folks who are surrounded by that endemic failure?
Well, I think the first point and the most important to make is that a large part of that endemic failure is due to the failures of governments over the last 50 years. Mass incarceration being the new Jim Crow, and the over-policing of communities of color, coupled with the schools to prison pipelines, makes it so that people who grow up in these communities very rarely have a chance to succeed in the first place. The reality is that the government has removed that agency from people's lives, that ability to go out, to grow, to become successful, because we're starting people off with police officers and metal detectors in their high schools looking for a chance to put something on their record. And once you've got one mark on your record, it's very easy to get 2 and then 3 and then 4, and it just turns. As we have such an overbearing criminal justice system, it boxes people out of employment opportunities, including most egregiously, in my view, the legal cannabis industry. Illinois managed to legalize. We did the right thing, and yet we still managed to do it the wrong way. We introduced so much regulatory burden that it's nearly $1 million just an upstart cost to get your license, let alone actually open the store. And in doing that, we've boxed out the very people who were so harmed by the war on drugs in the first place.
Right. It's you talk about the school to prison pipeline. That, again, is the common denominator amongst states which have disproportionate percentages of their population in some type of urban core. Yep. The lesson that we need to learn from Ferguson was not really anything to do with the prosecution of an individual police assault case, but had everything to do with the presence of an overriding militarized police force in the midst of a community that was unduly hassled and unduly targeted, while simultaneously, I'm sure the suburbs on the Miracle Mile weren't, or the folks on the Miracle Mile weren't exactly those targets, were they? And so the crushing impact it has on local economies is astonishing. And to your point, the very folks in some states were actually open-minded enough to accord some of the first licensing, and I know that makes us crazy. I mean, because as far as I'm concerned, cannabis is a plant. Cannabis is it should be treated the same way as broccoli. But ultimately, there has been no payoff to these communities except to be developed using crony corporatist funds as the next target for gentrification. So where do we stop? When does the music stop and we have enough chairs for everybody? You're right. The problem can be always tied back to government and the undue influences it has. Now, Illinois actually has cause for celebration this week, though.
Yes.
And give us a little talk on that, because it's great in the midst of all this pain, if you will, to hear good news on behalf of an affiliate.
Absolutely. So Illinois has the relatively standard petitioning requirements that libertarians need to get 4 or 5 times the amount of signatures that a Democratic or Republican candidate receives to get on the ballot. Now, that's already an unfair standard, and it's already made it very difficult for candidates to get on the ballot in the past, although with an incredibly expensive and drawn-out process of hiring gatherers, we've been able to make it for president and senate in the past, but individual state House candidates have struggled quite a bit to get on the ballot. That being said, this year is not a normal year, obviously. We all know what's going on outside, even if we haven't been outside. And, petitioning is completely impossible in these times. And we made the right decision, of course, to suspend petitioning efforts. But that left us in a very uncomfortable spot where we were unsure if we'd be able to make the ballot for any office. As a state party and as individual candidates, we asked the State Board of Elections for relief. We asked the governor's office for relief. And everybody basically told us, go talk to someone else. The state board said, talk to the governor said, talk to the state board, etc. Seeing no other viable path to ensuring fair and equal ballot access, we filed a suit against the state of Illinois a number of weeks ago. And as of, I want to say just yesterday or the day before, we got our answer. And it was fantastic news. So all candidates who are running for offices that the party was able to get ballot access in the last cycle will be granted ballot access automatically again. That means whoever our presidential nominee is will not need to petition to get on the ballot. Our Senate candidate, Danny Maloff, will be on the ballot, no problems. And for the rest of us, petitioning has been extended to August 7th. We will be allowed to submit electronically gathered signatures. And most importantly, the signature requirement is cut to 10% of the original requirement, which in the case of my district is 198 signatures.
Excellent.
Yeah, that is a completely doable number for me. Simply from people who are active in the county party, each of them reaching out to, 5, 10, 15 friends and neighbors and saying, hey, could you please do me the favor of, signing this and emailing it over? We should be easily able to clear that bar and get on the ballot, as will likely dozens of other libertarian candidates who otherwise might not have run or might have really run in name only. We have a unique opportunity this year to really field a full slate of candidates.
Now, and therein brings up the exigent challenge, and that is, what do we do now? It's somewhere in late April. I think we've all sort of lost track. The styling haircut that I have right now is a direct result of that.
Same.
The next step, of course, is where do we go from here? You're a veteran campaigner. I mean, you've done the presidential trail, you've done activist politics, and by the way, just as an aside, how important is it as someone looking for higher office to have experienced fundamental grassroots activism, both in terms of an understanding of the electorate that you're looking to lead, and to understand the process of gaining people's and individuals' trust, and the process of getting stuff done. How important is that to you?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important that when running for office, you have some form of a background in campaigning or grassroots work. You know, things like going out and knocking on people's doors, phone banking are relatively easy skills that anybody can pick up when they have to. But the back end skills of cutting phone lists, targeting specific voter sets, using the back end software that campaigns utilize, those are skills that you either need to hire somebody who already has them or have yourself. And as we all know, Libertarian Party candidates tend to have some fundraising struggles. And as a result, raising the funds to actually hire full-time campaign staff is basically out of the question. So for me, at least, that skill set is going to be what allows me to run this race effectively.
But you've also had the experience of being an operative, if you will. I love that term. You were an operative in a national campaign. The Yang campaign started out as really a handful of grassroots activists with an idea, and to a lot of people's astonishment, to quote the immortal, it was pretty good. They took it a long way. I frankly think he could have gone another month. I don't know that he would have ever gotten the nomination, but I think he could have taken it even a little bit further than he did.
Oh, absolutely.
What does that mean to you in terms of your portfolio of skills, having seen these issues and these approaches taken to scale?
I think that it's really given me some insight on how to fight a hard fight. It's easy to campaign for somebody who everybody knows and everybody likes. But when you're promoting a candidate who doesn't have that kind of name recognition, it's an entirely different skill set. You really have to give people their first introduction, their first taste of who this person is. And that was just such an incredible experience. I worked with a bunch of volunteers who had not even been politically active before. I had a phenomenal volunteer in Cedar Rapids who registered to vote for the first time in his life at 38. And in the 2 months that I worked with him, knocked on over 1,200 doors, left personalized notes from him and his wife to every family in his neighborhood, and just did an incredible amount of work. And seeing that transformation from inactive and disengaged to super volunteer really gave me a taste for what we can do if we put our minds to it, if we put the effort in, and we really reach out to people on their level and talk about the issues that matter to them.
One last question, but before we bring us together, and then we'll engage in what I love to refer to as shameless self-promotion. The term politician very often carries with it a sense of the pejorative. It's a negative word. You're a politician. As someone who's been an activist, speak to the opportunities, the movement that you can make within a stratified, calcified political system by being a politician. What doors it is open for you, and what can you accomplish?
Sure. Well, I think that it's important to delineate between politician, the dictionary term, and politician, the pop culture thought process. And when we think, oh, he's another politician, that carries very specific signifiers to. It implies somebody who's kind of enveloped by the swamp, whereas just to be an office holder, a representative in its purest form, means to speak on behalf of the people that sent you to the office. And so I think having the power and the role that comes with being a state legislator, while maintaining that genuine belief in supporting and representing the people that will have sent me to our state house, is going to be a very powerful thing. We don't have very many legislators in Illinois who truly represent the people that sent them to the state house.
Dan Fishman, can you bring in Mr. Manzo again? We got everybody. Great. First of all, I want to congratulate both of you, because the ultimately, one of the challenges that's circulating amongst the Libertarian Party, because it's been a tough year, a tough couple of years for us for a variety of reasons, is this frustration with candidacies. I can tell you that both of you, through sheer hard work over a number of years, have accumulated skills, talents, experiences, which, like so many of the folks that we've had on over the last few weeks, are really preparing you for a political career that will bring the libertarian movement to the forefront because of your efforts. The sheer institutional knowledge that the two of you have about the relative systems that you're immersing yourself and hoping to be part of is particularly astonishing. So my hat's off to both of you, and I hope both of you use those and promote those skills aggressively, because both of you, like the other folks we've had on the show over the last few weeks, run completely counter to the traditional image that the duopoly would place on us, is that we're a group of naive activists who have no sense of how to work and interact within government. You guys nailed it, and it makes me and it makes me particularly proud to be a libertarian when I have conversations like this. By the way, folks, if you're just joining us, we are on LPTV. We are the sort of the newish addition to the Libertarian Party media operations. We will be having programming as the week goes on. We're going to be developing more and more programming to showcase individuals within the Libertarian Party and to discuss these type of issues. A big thanks out again to Dan Fishman, the executive director of the party, for making this happen. But first of all, and like I said, we want to have time for shameless self-promotion, but is there any advice that you could give to each other, having listened to it, listening to the show, or things that you find remarkable about the other candidate?
Sure, I'll start. I think that Sasha has, as you've mentioned a few times, great institutional knowledge from being an operative on a political campaign before he ran his a campaign of his own. Is obviously extremely important. Seeing the other operatives on the campaign giving pointers and guidance to the candidate, you can take that and use it on your own. And seeing a perhaps more seasoned campaigner, Andrew Yang, of course, was a first-time candidate himself, but he's presented nonprofit proposals, of course, and other proposals to NGO boards. So I would say that it's extremely similar, campaigning perhaps to a smaller set of people and with a different set of interests, but definitely, very important seeing that type of person interact with the public, and having that knowledge is going to be a great help to Sasha.
And Sasha, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's absolutely incredible to meet, somebody like Richard, who's even younger than I am. I'm 23. I believe you said you were 21, right, Rich?
Yes.
Who not only is involved and active in the party, but is already an office holder and has been assisting so much on a presidential run as well within the party. We've both been active and involved with the Supreme campaign, and it's been incredible getting to bounce ideas and share knowledge and work together. And I look forward to doing more of it as we get closer and closer to November.
Sasha, while we've got you on camera, engage in shameless self-promotion. Tell us where folks can reach out to you, where they can find out more about your campaign. Give us the resume here.
Sure thing. So my site, it's right up on the screen right now, sasha470.com. You can check me out there. I've got some issue stances, policy proposals, and right there under the words Northern Illinois, there's a little link to donate.
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic. Running a campaign takes a sizable amount of money, but it can absolutely be done. And if you want to check me out on Facebook, I'm also there at Sasha470.
And Richard.
Sure. My website is richardmanzo.com. There's going to be a green button that'll say donate somewhere up in the top right-hand corner. But if you want to go directly there, just add a /donate to your URL. And as was mentioned before, I'm a credible candidate. I have a direct government experience for the office I'm running for. And, lastly, I would add that while I am quote unquote a politician, I'm also a if you could call it a street activist. Definitely gotten more involved with more somewhere between performance artistry and street activism. I would call it performance activism in the recent years. Subversive messaging, subversive actions against the state, and of course, engaging with the political left has been a very important goal of mine. I do believe that the Libertarian Party has criminal justice, social positions that we can offer to the political left that'll help us grow as a party. And last but not least, I would say that even our views on taxation are very sellable to the left if you know how to package them right. So head over to richardmanzo.com, pitch in whatever you can right now. The last race, the incumbent spent, I think, $2,000 to $4,000. So we're not really looking at an insurmountable spending amount here. So thank you.
Again, congratulations to both of you and to all the folks we've had on the air. You walk away from a conversation like this, and I feel absolutely empowered when I look at the challenges that these two gentlemen have overcome and where they've positioned themselves so early in their political career, given the experience, the weight of their message, the understanding of their community. I can think of nothing but great things for our movement. And I hope this show continues to showcase individual candidates who are doing just that, literally in the grassroots, literally around this country. Folks, if you are a candidate for office, what we call the down ballot, anything from the water board on up really to the governorship of any affiliate around the country, please reach out to me and to the show. You can reach me at P4 at coalitionradio.us and reach out to Dan Fishman, of course, at the National Libertarian headquarters. Again, we will continue this effort. We hope to see you next Friday night. If you enjoyed the show as much as I did tonight, take a moment and share it amongst your affiliate. Share the lessons that these gentlemen have been able to bring to us, as well as the last few weeks when we've had folks, again, from town council to governor and just about everything in between, running as committed libertarians. Yes, committed libertarians for offices around the country. Thanks for joining us tonight. Again, a big thanks to Dan Fishman, super producer Joel Normandin, and of course, National Chairman Nick Sarwalk. Have a wonderful week.